Welcome to the channel. My name's Stu and this is a story about returning to play electric guitar after putting it down nearly 40 years ago and the lessons learned to get up to speed with the many changes in the music industry when looking to purchase guitars, amps and pedals. Now, I will disclose at this point I've been a professional filmmaker working internationally on a diverse range of productions, so it's relatively easy for me to put together a video presentation. And because of that, having benefited from the many social media reviews, I thought it a good idea to share my own journey with others, particularly if, like me, after years of work and getting some time to yourself, are returning to playing, or of course, for those of you starting out, generational differences aside, I hope you're going to find this series helpful. And for others who've been playing for years and haven't stopped, well, you might just find it entertaining. Okay, so I don't want to ramble, but at the same time, I don't want to cut away at the heart of the journey because it's often in the little comments that shed a bit of light on a given topic. So where does this story begin? Well, briefly, I began playing the electric guitar back around 1974 with the intent that music would be my chosen profession. And to help supplement and support that goal, I had a number of 9-to-5 jobs along the way, mainly in engineering. Now, for nearly 10 years, I performed at many venues up until about 1984, when after a life of good times and bad times, I walked away from everything. I had a deep change of heart and would end up entering the world of commercial photography, advertising, broadcast video and film production. And that's been my profession to date. Now, as you'll already be aware, music production and sound design is an integral part of the filmmaking process, regardless of what the projects are, be it a 30-second TV commercial, a full-blown documentary or a feature film. So despite laying down my guitar all those years ago, music and sound design would continue to surround me pretty much every working day. So the guitar hunt. Well, around 2014, I was working on an independent feature film and I found out that one of the camera assistants was in a band. And at one point, I was at his studio. And after a little encouragement from him, I was holding his Gibson Les Paul. And old memories, good memories, drifted back to my mind. This event piqued my interest in guitars. And later that week, just out of interest, I went onto the internet to look up guitar shops. And the first thing that struck me was the diversity of guitars available. But I'm not speaking of the different manufacturers. I mean, when I went to look out all my favourite guitars, like the Fender Stratocaster, there just seemed to be an endless line of types and models. And to be quite frank, I found it all just a bit overwhelming. Kind of reminded me of a visit to a New York deli, confronted by a menu listing dozens of coffee products when all I wanted was a cup of coffee. Now, to help those of you who are younger picture my dilemma, back in the early 1970s, nearly every Saturday morning, my mates and I we'd go to the music shops. This would be in Edinburgh in Scotland, and a shop assistant would approach to inquire if we needed any help, and my reply would be something like, "Hi, have you got any Fender Strats I can look at?" And the answer would be, "Sure, there it is over there." Or in one particular shop, we would be told, "Give me 5 minutes and I'll go and get it from the back store," presumably to keep it safe from young whippersnappers like me who had no money. Today, walk into most music stores and the walls and the floor space are just crammed with products. Now, while I found my initial internet search very revealing, I felt that I couldn't make any informed choices, not until I'd done some homework, because clearly there were big changes and I needed to get up to speed. And at that particular time, I was just far too busy to give the time needed to help me make an informed decision. After all, guitar prices looked astronomical compared to the old days. Although in fact, given the rate of inflation over the decades, I soon realised guitars and other equipment was in many cases cheaper than in the 1970s. For example, a typical Fender Strat in 1970 would cost around $360. Now, if you convert that in today's money, give or take inflationary issues at the moment, that would be around $2,700 in today's money. And yet today, a new Fender American Pro 2 is around $1,600 or $1,700. Now, that's just a very general calculation. In most cases, music equipment has actually come down in price, and much of that can be attributed to modern computerized manufacturing technologies. But sure, there will be other things that you can take into consideration. Anyway, I just thought I'd throw in that to bring a bit of perspective. So, as I say, I was too busy to look into this further. But just when I'd put these kind of thoughts of buying a guitar on the back burner, around 2017, one of the studio editors here brought me a little surprise, something he had stored away in some cupboard, and it was this Ibanez GRG 170DX. Along with it, a little 5-watt Vox combo amplifier, and yes, as you can see, my mate also dropped in this brute of a Marshall combo, but more on that later. So all of this was such a surprise. I was really taken aback. And, you know, holding this slick electric guitar in my hands certainly brought a smile to my face. Now, apart from, you know, never seeing a Floyd Rose tremolo system before, it was a lovely guitar to play. Typical Ibanez, and I've owned a couple in the past, one of which was one of the first Ibanez Destroyer types. But that's another story. So I was really grateful for the loan of this guitar, as it helped me to practice and learn new things. However, despite its playability, I couldn't bond with the guitar. For me, you know, there were only two guitars that I knew I'd instantly bond with. Tradition, reliving a childhood memory, possibly. At that time, I was still very much working long hours on various documentary projects, covering everything from model railways to controversial films about dinosaurs, and even films about the end of the world. All great topics for dramatic music production. And just a wee side note, which might be of interest to some of you. We were filming an independent feature film back in 2014 at a little place way out in the countryside called the Bean Inn. And this is about an hour's drive from Edinburgh. And this little unassuming village building is listed as being famous. Famous for what? No, not for our feature film being shot there. It's famous because of the numerous rock stars and namely famous guitar players who had once, at one time, stayed there and had rooms named after them. And when we went there to recce the place before filming, we went down to the cellar bar where we were told by one of the staff that many years ago, in the corner of the room, sat jamming late into the night, was Jimi Hendrix and a few other musicians of note. Now, the inn was sold and the original owner bought another building, which was actually not too far away. And I was also commissioned to do some filming there as well. And on the walls of that building, you can still see various guitars in glass cases signed by a host of famous musicians. And as far as I'm aware, these guitars were originally on the walls of the Bean Inn. So, sorry to change the subject. It was just such a nice little surprise to all of us in the film crew who have an interest in music. So back to my journey regarding guitar hunting. Now, while I would grab, well, like an hour here or there to do some research on guitars, there was something looming on the horizon that would curtail the working practices of most people around the world. Now, as a documentary filmmaker, I was already aware of the looming pandemic crisis and the probable effects that was going to have on businesses, let alone the tragic loss of life. And it was during that strange period of time, as filming projects was cancelled, and just about everything in my industry came to a grinding halt, with the odd exception. I now had more time to research that guitar purchase. And yes, it was either going to be a Stratocaster or possibly a Telecaster. And I can almost hear some of you smiling, because you know what happened. Now, my plan was always to fully inform myself of what was available before entering a guitar store, because having limited knowledge on the differences between various model types and the standard of manufacturing, be it from Japan, Mexico, or the Corona factory in the USA, I just didn't want to find myself faffing around in a store trying to get to grips with it all. And, you know, do comment below on your own experiences visiting music stores, because sadly, it's not always a good experience for some folks, and it can be a little intimidating. But as the world closed its doors, or at least the shops on the high street, my purchase would need to be done on the internet. So as someone returning to guitar after many years, I felt there was little room for making the wrong choice. Now, I should say, in the 1970s, I owned a couple of Japanese branded guitars purchased via my mother's shopping catalogue. And for those of you who have no idea what I'm talking about, those were large, thick catalogues that sold just about everything, including the kitchen and its sink. And they had a section for musical equipment. And I loved flicking through those pages. Anyway, my point being, I got at least 2 very good guitars via mail order in those days, and they were delivered in excellent condition. And of course, in more modern times, in the film production business, we've over the decades purchased very expensive equipment via the internet without issue, although reputable dealers more often than not are used for particular product acquisitions. And that's something that I have carried through in regard to music equipment purchase. Expensive items where I need accountability and security, I'll use an authorised dealer, but happy to use lesser known outlets for less expensive products. So, sitting at my desk with copious cups of coffee, a notepad, and an hour or two every night reviewing guitar articles, watching videos online of tours around guitar manufacturing workshops, the odd guitar documentary, and within a couple of weeks, I now felt I had a very good understanding and made a decision regarding my first guitar purchase in more than 40 years. You know, it's been nearly 50 years since first holding a Fender Stratocaster in my hands, but not mine. You see, I never owned my own Fender. At 14 years old, I could only afford a Japanese copy, a guitar that actually played very well and would go on to see many changes and alterations. But still, I had never owned my own American-made Fender Stratocaster. For those of you who are used to playing in bands or perhaps trying to put one together, one of the main reasons I couldn't for some time afford a Fender or a Gibson was because, as a band, we were committed to purchasing so much equipment. One of the biggest expenses was a concert PA system and all that goes with that. These were large sums of money, taking a number of years to pay off. But one thing was important, was a good backline amplifier. And I maintain you could have a decent budget-based guitar played through a good backline and you're good to go. But conversely, you can have an expensive guitar but plugged into a poor backline, and that costly guitar is not going to sound as it should. I often see people reviewing and comparing guitars, budget models against expensive branded models. And it might interest some younger viewers to know that many of the Japanese copies of the 70s were very well made guitars. And as long as they were set up correctly and with a good backline amplifier, they were widely used. Sometimes you change out the pickups, replace the nut, maybe the machine heads, and some of them they really were good to play. Sure, not all. But I think with so much choice today, and considering the quality of computer-controlled manufacturing, you know, getting a badly made instrument today, I would think that's rare. And I would say folks are spoiled for choice. In the next video, you'll get to see the guitar model that I ended up choosing. And based on the research done, I got the right guitar. And no, it wasn't this one. So if you've enjoyed the journey so far, and it's quite a journey, subscribe to get notified, and please do share your own experiences below, whether a newcomer, an ongoing player, or like me, an old hand returning to guitar playing. So until next time, the journey continues. Take care.